Imagine jumping out of an airplane during World War II, parachuting into hostile territory, and landing alone behind enemy lines. Instead of running, you open a small canister, unfold it, and reveal a tiny motorcycle designed for one purpose, getting you moving fast. This was the legendary Welbike. Before we dive into this fascinating piece of WWII history, make sure to subscribe and join our community. Here we bring forgotten stories of war, courage, and invention back to life. Like this video if you enjoy hidden gems of history, and share it with someone who loves wartime ingenuity. World War II wasn't just fought with guns, tanks, and planes, it was also a battle of ideas. Each nation searched desperately for innovations that could give its soldiers even the smallest edge. Britain, fighting against overwhelming odds, had to rely on ingenuity as much as firepower. Among these inventions came one of the most unusual machines of the war, the Welbike. It was small, almost comically so, yet it had a serious purpose. Packed into a steel canister, it could be dropped from the sky alongside paratroopers. Within moments, it unfolded into a functioning motorcycle. For soldiers landing far behind enemy lines, that meant a fighting chance to regroup, escape, or strike quickly. But how did this odd little motorcycle come to exist? And did it truly serve its purpose, or was it more of a novelty? To answer those questions, we need to step back into wartime Britain, when necessity pushed engineers into incredible directions. The Welbike story begins in 1940, at a time when Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. The Battle of Britain raged in the skies, and invasion loomed as a very real threat. In this atmosphere, a secretive branch of British intelligence called Station 9 was tasked with dreaming up unconventional weapons. Station 9 operated under the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, famously nicknamed Churchill's Secret Army. Their mission was sabotage, espionage, and special warfare. If something sounded impossible, this was the group to attempt it. One of their ideas was simple yet bold: parachute soldiers deep behind enemy lines with equipment light enough to carry, but powerful enough to change the odds. Mobility was critical. Soldiers on foot could only move so far, and carrying heavy gear made them slow. The solution? A motorcycle so compact it could fit into a steel tube, light enough to drop from a plane. Thus the Welbike was conceived, not by a big factory or a famous car company, but by a team of unconventional thinkers who believed that even the smallest machine could alter the course of battle. Designing a motorcycle to fit into a cylinder less than 6 feet long was no easy task. Engineers stripped it down to the bare essentials. No suspension, no lights, no kickstand. Just 2 small wheels, a simple 2-stroke engine, and foldable handlebars. The engine itself was only 98 cc, tiny even by the standards of the time. It could reach about 30 miles per hour on flat ground, though in real conditions, with mud, fields, and enemy fire, the speed was often much less. Fuel came from a small tank that held just enough for a short escape, about 90 miles at best. One of the Welbike's most striking features was how it unfolded. Once the canister hit the ground, a soldier would pull it open, drag out the compact bike, and with a few quick adjustments, raising the handlebars, securing the seat, and priming the engine, it was ready to go. In theory, the process took less than 30 seconds. The canister itself was nearly as clever as the bike. Measuring about 130 centimeters long and weighing under 70 pounds, it could be dropped by parachute. Several could fit into the bomb bay of a plane, ready to be pushed out alongside the men. It was ingenious, but simplicity came at a cost. Soldiers quickly discovered that the Welbike was not easy to ride on rough terrain. With no suspension and tiny wheels, it struggled on anything but hard, flat surfaces. Worse still, it had no lights, which meant nighttime use was tricky at best. Despite its limitations, the Welbike was adopted in 1942 and deployed with Paratroopers and Special Forces units. The very first operational use was during the North African campaign. British troops dropping into desert terrain carried Welbikes with them, hoping for a fast way to cross the sand. Unfortunately, the sandy landscape proved too much. The tiny wheels bogged down and the underpowered engine often stalled. Many bikes were abandoned almost as soon as they were unpacked. But commanders still believed in the idea, especially for Europe, where firmer ground might suit the design better. During Operation Market Garden in 1944, the famous airborne assault on the Netherlands, Welbikes were again deployed. Paratroopers carried them in canisters, eager to speed toward their objectives, and once again reality clashed with theory. Many Welbikes were damaged on landing or took too long to assemble under fire. Worse, the scattered drop zones meant that soldiers often couldn't even find their canisters. A bike was useless if it landed 100 yards away in a ditch or a tree. Still, when conditions were just right, the Welbike gave paratroopers a burst of mobility. Imagine the relief of a soldier, cut off from his unit, suddenly able to ride instead of run. It wasn't perfect, but in those moments it could save a life. It's easy today to dismiss the Welbike as a failure, and in purely military terms it didn't achieve what its creators had hoped. But to understand it properly, we have to look at the spirit behind it. The Welbike represented a nation's determination to innovate under pressure. Every ounce of metal, every hour of design, was dedicated to giving young men even the slimmest chance of survival. And though the Welbike itself faded quickly from combat use, it left behind a surprising legacy. After the war, civilian versions were developed. These were sold under names like the Corgi in Britain and the Indian Papoose in America. Suddenly, a design born in secrecy for soldiers became a friendly little scooter for everyday people. Thousands were sold, and some even became collector's items, treasured for their odd shape and wartime history. In that way, the Welbike became more than just a weapon. It became a symbol of how wartime inventions can find new life in peace. Perhaps the most touching part of the Welbike's story isn't its engineering, but the men who rode it. Imagine a young paratrooper, just 20 years old, dropping into darkness. His parachute snaps open. The ground races up. When he lands, alone and frightened, he fumbles with the steel canister. Inside is not just a machine, but a lifeline. Even if the bike didn't work perfectly, the very act of unfolding it, of knowing that someone back home had thought of his needs, gave comfort. For many soldiers, these small details mattered. In war, psychology is as powerful as weapons. The Welbike carried with it a reminder that back in Britain, men and women were inventing, building, and hoping for their safe return. Looking back, what can we learn from the Welbike? First, that innovation often comes with failure. Not every idea will succeed. Yet the courage to try is itself a victory. Second, the Welbike shows how war accelerates technology. Without the urgent demands of World War II, no one would have thought to design a motorcycle in a canister. But because of that urgency, the world received a quirky invention that later brightened civilian life. Finally, it teaches us something about the human spirit. Even in the darkest times, people search for ways to protect each other. Whether it's through a machine, a strategy, or simply a gesture, the drive to preserve life is at the heart of invention. The Welbike was never the star of the war. It didn't turn battles. It didn't win campaigns. But it remains one of the most unusual and fascinating inventions of WWII, a tiny motorcycle born from desperation that carried not just soldiers, but also the hopes of a nation. When we see one today in a museum or a private collection, it may look strange, even amusing. Yet behind its quirky frame lies a powerful story, the story of courage, creativity, and the will to survive. So next time you see a photograph of a soldier unfolding this miniature machine, remember, it wasn't just a bike. It was a symbol of ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds,